Welcome to Corinnes Picks. I'm your host, Corinne Basabe. Corinnes Picks is a show about looking at the careers of fabulous artists and looking at works of art. Today we have Paula deJoie. She's a Bay Area artist. She's well regarded in the realm of spirituality and healing arts. Welcome to the show today, Paula.
I'm so happy to be here and to see you, Corinne. We miss you in the Bay.
I know I missed the Bay too. When I knew you, I've known you for almost 20 years. When I known you in the Bay Area, remember that you were doing um, mixed media pieces, which you still do, but using layers of wax. I believe you refer to it as acoustics.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, in Caustic, where I would I have a beautiful collection of vintage photographs from both sides of my family, and I always wanted to share them. So one of the first ways of doing that was with the encaustic method.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the work you're doing now. I know that the series you're doing now via cards, but just and abstracts, and also just paintings that stand alone as paintings. I know that you're diving deeply into the realm of art and spirituality, and it's very interesting because your background is Afro-Indigenous, and in both those cultures, you're really honoring their traditions because in African culture and Indigenous cultures, art has a function. It's not just for decoration. So it's very interesting that you're using it as a medium for healing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think even as a child, I was born in LA, grew up in the Crenshaw district. When there was trauma around me, I would draw. I first started drawing trees, and then I loved old people's faces. So I loved lines, a lot of lines that I have now, I guess. And so it was always a refuge for me to just go in my room and either write a poem or draw something that represented me. And through this healing process, I remember one of my first drawings as a child was of two little brown kids with their hands upraised, like Jesus with blood coming out. And when I left home, my mother eventually found those and threw them away. She was really appalled by them. But anyway, so much for denial. But anyway, now I've all these years later, when you get to be my age, people have so many stories, and I'm trying to encourage them to tell them through art and writing, and you release something when you do that, become lighter and freer. So that's my focus now.
And tell us a little bit more about the healing. I know that as artists, sometimes we heal ourselves through just the process of painting or creating things. But the person who buys your work, what is the healing aspect for them?
Well, here's the thing. I really haven't enjoyed selling work. I miss my work when I sell it. They're like my babies. They're so personal. But what I'm doing now is encouraging people to use some of my methods to create their own healing work. And I don't know. It's there's all different levels. Like the abstracts are mainly just pure spirit, whatever just happens to come out of me and my feelings. Whereas the other works, some of the more recent works, are directly connected to my African and Indigenous ancestors as a way of thanking them and being grateful and writing into the artwork what I'm grateful for. And you'd have to kind of see them to really, for me to really explain.
Yeah, I really appreciated that because when I read um, African history or a history from the diaspora, I was surprised to see that the histories are really parallel with the indigenous people's history. When in the founding of New England, in my side of the country, the first large scale slavery was Native American. And when I'm reading about Afro American history in the wills of the I guess landowners, I'm seeing indigenous people also being listed, specifically in New York City. So I'm really appreciating that you connect the two histories for your audience, because a lot of Afro-Americans don't realize that we do have that connection with Native people.
Well, my brother actually helped me with that. He recently retired from teaching both African American and Native American art at the University of Montana, and he researched our family tree and wrote a book about it. And one of my great grandfathers was actually born in New York, but he went back to the East Coast, where some of our ancestors, the Wampanoag tribe, actually welcomed the pilgrims and taught them how to farm. And then they were, most of them were slaughtered. So my brother actually brought me back some wampum from the beach where some of my ancestors lived. Um, Most African Americans are mixed with something, very few of us are pure Africans. So we all have some European and Native American ancestry. But when we grow up, I grew up as a Black girl, in Crenshaw, and I was quite content with that. But my brother wanted to explore more of the Indian culture. But I've always just considered I'm a multi-ethnic Black woman, and that's how I grew up.
Yeah, I think both things can coexist. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
one thing cancels out the other. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to say the names of those people and that are in your family lineage. But I have these shows with interesting people, and I forget to talk about the art. So I want to start looking at some of the images and really getting some of your thinking in terms of the creation of these images. So can we see the first slide?
Oh, that's my very first oil painting when I was a student at Cal, UC Berkeley, in the art department. Um, I was usually the only Black or brown person in my class, and I didn't have any mentors really. I had wonderful teachers, Elmer Bischoff, Carl Caston, Robert Hartman, all that whole crew. But this particular painting was painted in the studio of Malachias Montoya. Eventually, Malachias and David Bradford were allowed to have separate facilities for Chicano, what we called Chicano back then, and Black art. So this was the very first oil painting I did. And it's of two Biafran children in a refugee camp. It was back then, the Biafran, the civil war was going on in Nigeria. And women and children suffer the most in any war. And so this is what came to me. I saw a black and white photo of these two children and just painted them and added all the color.
Okay, can we see the next one? Is this a self-portrait?
Oh, no, it's funny you should say that. I found there used to be a beautiful book called Black Photographers. So this was a black and white photo of a woman in a kitchen who reminded me of both of my grandmothers. One is very fair and one is dark. So she's like a combination of them. So this is called Grandma's Hands. So I was always very close to my grandmothers. They always welcomed me with open arms and open hearts. And they really created a safe, loving place for me. So this is a tribute to both of my grandmothers. That's also oil.
Oh, so it's oil. Okay, I was
Yeah.
wondering what medium you used.
Yeah, most recently I used liquid acrylics, but these early paintings were in oil. Oh, this was just me playing with watercolor. My mother was a watercolor painter, and I was not so much because it's more difficult than it looks to paint a watercolor painting. You have a lot of unexpected, happy surprises. Anyway, so I was just playing around with this. This is called grooving, and it's just back in the day, I went to Audubon Junior High, and we had a lot of house parties, and they were just so much fun. And so that's what this reminded me of. So this is a little more recent. This I painted. Well, it's a mixed media piece when about 300 Nigerian schoolgirls were kidnapped by the Boko Haram terrorist group, and many, if not most of them, were raped and kept as so-called wives, and they were little girls basically. So I felt like not enough was being done about it, especially in the news. The coverage wasn't daily as it would be if these little girls had been blue-eyed blonde little girls. So I went online and I found many of their photographs and their names, and I printed them out. And this is where I used some of that photo image transfer method, where I printed out the names and then transferred them onto rice paper and then put them on the painting. So this one is called She Who Watches Over Those Still Missing. So I have some of the actual parents at the bottom, and I think Obama's in there somewhere, in the Nigerian president. There's so many. The power corrupts in every country, whether it's Asia, Africa, Europe, the Americas. Those in power just take and take, and they don't. Well, the reason this is on my mind is I just saw a documentary about Imelda Marcos and her delusions that all the wealth that she and her family stole, billions, that her people loved it. They love her. And anyway, it's all this fake news stuff that we've been experiencing with Trump. People need to be more aware. And if you could do anything, do something, write a letter or send a check, do whatever you can do. Pray. This comes back to the self and your own spirituality and what sits well with you and what doesn't. Well, this didn't sit well with me, so I had to create this image. And in an effort, I guess, to let them know that we still care. We're watching over you spiritually. Somebody is. And that's what this came out of, just feeling of helplessness, but I had to do something. So I do things through my art and my words.
So we have about 1 second left before we go to a commercial. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about art and activism. Thank you, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
This is the story of a boy who didn't talk for a long time. The boy liked things to always be the same. Any changes would scare and upset him. The unknown was an unfriendly place. The boy was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. He wasn't trying to be mean, it just made him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he would flap his arms again and again.
One day, I found out I had something called autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I found my voice and learned all the ways I could live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Kids!
I don't want to talk about it.
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 Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency.
Kids, you all right?
This family's prepared. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 for more information.
So welcome back to Corinnes Picks. We have with us today Paula deJoie. We've been talking about her early works, and the last image we saw had to do with the girls that were kidnapped in Nigeria. Can you tell us a little bit about art and activism and what it means to you?
Well, even as a student at UC Berkeley, I would make the flyers for the rallies and decorate them with like African symbols, and it's just a natural expression that if you're aware of what's going on in the world and you feel helpless, you have to figure out what you can do. And so I did a lot of that. When I had spent my junior year at UCLA, and I was friends with a lot of people in the film department, and one of them was Haile Gerima, who did the classic Sankofa film. Well, his very first film that he was working on at UCLA was called Bush Mama. And so he had me do the flyer for it. And coincidentally, we were talking about Daughters of the Dust earlier. The main character in that movie, her name at the time was Barbara Price. Maybe it's Barbara O now. But anyway, she starred in Haile's first film. So I did a drawing of her with a rifle over one shoulder and a baby over the other. And it's just something that's just come naturally to me throughout my life. Is just, if that's what I can contribute. I'm more of a quiet person, and when you're a writer and an artist, you live in solitude for most of the time. So rather than go out and give speeches, I just sit at my desk and create something that will help.
That's terrific. Okay, so let's see some more of your works. I want to make sure we see all of them before the end of the show.
Oh, this piece is called What is White? And although I usually use vintage family photographs, this photograph I found at the Berkeley flea market of this white family. And what prompted this is I have some relatives on my mother's side who are passing for white. So this is kind of the story of one of those relatives. And in the center, you see a line that's red, white, and blue. Because this is, as long as we've been here, there's been people who are the products of rape, who then got with other, with the fair skin, free colored folks, which is my mother's line. They oftentimes married other fair skin people, and then their kids eventually could pass for white. And in my mother's family, a few of them did. So that's enough about him.
Okay.
Oh, this is a piece. Jemima Haiku. This is, I think, it's either right before or during my divorce. I was married for 23 years. And so this is more of a self-emancipation piece about not wanting to be boxed in by anyone and reclaiming who I was. Because in marriage or long-term partnerships, there's a lot of compromise. And I think a lot of women lose who they are because they're trying to please. They want to make the marriage work. And that's a whole thing about relationships. It's the initial attraction, and you get to know each other. And oftentimes people are not putting out their real face because they want to be admired anyway, that's a whole other thing. But anyway, this was about me reclaiming myself after this divorce. It's
one of my favorite as well. Because of the elements of, it looks like torn paper and the writing. I looked on your website. That was my favorite piece.
Thank you. I actually have it right here above me on the wall. And you want me to read the poem that goes with it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, it says, "Don't Jemima me. My bandana is pure gold and I never smile. Don't Jemima me. Your square box cannot contain my dangerous curves. Don't Jemima me, I will poison your pancakes, make you eat the truth. Don't Jemima me, you do not know me that well, and God is watching. Don't Jemima me with your time-worn recipes. I'll make my own me."
And that's the poem you wrote?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Can we see the next image?
Oh, so this begins this isn't the very first, but I started doing abstracts. And this is also, I think, began during my divorce period, which dragged on for almost 5 years. So this I call storm. And what I see, I can see a boat in a storm and buildings or whatever, but people just bring whatever is inside them to a piece. But this was like a stormy period. And this also has torn paper and liquid acrylics. And I paint most of the abstracts on Yupo paper. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No,
Yupo, it's made of recycled materials. It was originally produced in Japan, and it has a very slick surface, so you can really play with the water on the Yupo. I love doing that. And this is water snakes. So this is just playing with blue. And I looked at it, I thought figures that look like snakes. So it's kind of a play on words. It's kind of the water is snaking and they're also water snakes. So blue is a healing color. And growing up in LA, I was very attached to the ocean. And I actually used to body surf when I was young. So the water has always held a healing place for me. And you'll find that in African cultures, Yemaya, the goddess of the ocean, I'm very attached to her spirit too. So this is another one. This was healing for me. It's called In the Garden, because when I moved out of my home, I got one of these in-law apartments up in El Cerrito Hills looking over a gorgeous garden. And I could see a little bit of the bay. And the garden was just so vibrant. I wanted to capture that in this painting. And that's also on Yupo paper with liquid acrylics. Now I took a set of healing classes with a group called Musea. They're based in Sonoma. So this particular class was called Apothecary. And what this is about is displaying what my personal tools are for my own healing. So if you see on her hip, she looks a little bit like Josephine Baker there. You see a paintbrush on one side and a writing quill on the other side. And the quill was actually made by indigenous people in Costa Rica. A friend brought that back for me. And I have a double heart, which is one of my symbols, with kind of water on the sides of the heart, which is healing. So this piece is called And Still I Rise. Originally, it was called, I think, Embracing Joy, about that. But the whole thing is about when you do your healing work, hopefully you end up in a place of joy and feeling free. So freedom is the actual goal, freedom from all the baggage that so many of us carry. And I know I had my share. So this painting has about 13 layers to it. And it was definitely a healing piece of work for me.
How do you get people to connect in that way with personal trauma or pain? How do you get them to do the healing work through art?
Well, I think it begins with journaling. I really advise people to journal, write down whatever comes up. And you don't have to share it. It can be very private, but it's very beneficial. I have numerous journals. I started keeping diaries when I was a kid. It just helps to write it out. And it also helps if you're with a group of like-minded people who have similar goals. And then you find comfort in that. Oftentimes no one knows how you really feel or what you've gone through unless they've been through something similar. So
I know that you do healing circles, and you actually lead classes. What would you do in a classroom setting to get them to do it?
Well, actually, right now, I applied for a grant, an artist grant from the city of Berkeley, and I'll know at the end of the month if I get it. But the grant is specifically for creating a healing circle with elders. I feel that when you become an elder, anyone I would say over 65, I feel like you don't want to go out quietly. At least I don't. I want to go out with a bang, with people having known that I was here. So this particular circle will involve them bringing photos of people who were special in their lives, like I use with my healing cards, and talking about them, sharing the stories of where they came from. And then we would eventually collage these photos. I would take copies of them and they would work them into a collage using paint and papers and whatever. But to me, the important thing is the story. The important thing is to be seen and to share your story with others.
And I think sometimes it creates self-awareness too. A lot of people don't necessarily know how to sit and let that information come up.
Well, what I did with the circles that I led before is I start with, not everyone is religious, but it's a prayer that doesn't name, Jesus, Mary, God, whatever, but it's spirit, just pure spirit, whatever you connect to personally. And I'll say a prayer about bringing that spirit forth and trusting it and being open to it and know that you're being held. And from there, just kind of go creating the safe space where people feel like they can share and they won't be judged. They won't be criticized.
I think we have 4 images to go. I want to make sure they see all of your work.
Oh, so this is from that same series. This is a African Indian Earth Mother Goddess, and this was a very personal piece. I even have my handprint down there. But the raven, but through Indian astrology, the raven is the clan or the sign that I'm born into. And this is just a piece where I try to incorporate both the African and indigenous ancestors. Okay, this is interesting. This is my grandmother's grandmother on my mother's side. And she was born on James Madison's estate. And my grandmother, who was a blue-eyed, blonde, colored woman, thought that she was a descendant of James Madison. But through my brother's studies, found out that back then, these wealthy plantation owners and slave owners had what they called a gentleman's hospitality, where they visited each other and their host would offer them a woman, an African woman, to rape, basically. So this, my great-great-great-grandmother, is a product of James Madison offering her mother to a guy named Dr. Thornton, which is her last name. So this is one of the cards. I've created 40 cards, ancestor wisdom healing cards, and I'm writing the guidebook now. This is my grandmother on my father's side. I have her 1914 diploma from a small college in Little Rock, Arkansas, called Philander Smith. It's still there. But when she came to California, the only job she could find was as an upstairs maid in a Pasadena mansion. Once a month, the owner let her friends come over for a garden party. So that's that. This one I did more recently, because I want people to look at our beautiful Black young men and not see a criminal, not be afraid, but to see the beauty in that person. So these 2 guys went to college with my grandfather, and I love their faces. And I want people to see that.
So I know these cards will be made available soon. I definitely want to explore a little bit about you and your art. We have only about 45 seconds left. But I do want to thank you. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I've always admired you and your art. Thank you. Any last words?
Well, thank you. I've always admired your art, and I have a painting of yours of a child that I just love. And I'm happy to be here. Maybe when my cards come out, I can come back and share them. But that's what I'm working on now, the Ancestor Wisdom Healing cards. You can see some of them on my website. So hopefully by the end of the year, they'll be available.
Okay, so looking forward to part 2. Thank you. And this has been Corinnes Picks with Paula deJoie.
Thank you, Corinne.